3 haunted narratives in spine-chilling São Paulo, unexplained terrors revealed. Leela stood behind the counter of the Ridgewood Diner, the clock ticking away the night. Rain battered the window, casting eerie shadows across the linoleum floor. The neon sign flickered, a haunting flicker, mirroring the anxiety gnawing at her gut. Outside, a figure in uniform loitered by the parking lot's edge, and her heart raced. It wasn't just the late hour. It was the way he shadowed her neighborhood, a predator lurking in the guise of authority. 2 patrons at booth 6 argued in hushed tones, their voices barely breaking the steady hum of the diner. Pouring coffee for an exhausted trucker, strands of their bitter arguments seeped into her awareness. "They say there's something wrong, something hiding in the shadows," the woman whispered, her eyes darting toward the window. With a glance, Leela followed her gaze. The man outside stood unnaturally still, as if time had momentarily paused around him. Her thoughts fractured as panic hung heavy in the air. She fought to breathe steadily, to ignore the chill creeping down her spine. Conversations among the few late-night customers had turned dark, whispers of disappearances linked to the forsaken St. Michael's Hospital. Each name had weight, each story weighed with dreadful detail, dragging her deeper into dread. Just then, the bell above the door jingled violently, and in burst Max, his normally lively face twisted with anxiety. "Mom," he gasped, scanning the dim diner. "I saw him, that cop. He's been watching me." Leela felt her blood run cold. What was supposed to be a comforting world had crumbled, every mundane sound now a harbinger of danger. Days turned into sleepless nights. Max stopped hanging out with friends after dark. His nervous energy turned into tight desperation. She secretly watched their home, but the unease persisted. There was something lurking just beyond their comfort, like a tide ready to sweep them away. One evening, as Leela washed dishes, she heard a voice cut through the silence. "Max, I need to speak to you." The words slipped from the cop's mouth outside, terrifying and insistent. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." The night felt alive when Leela finally summoned her courage. She stepped outside into the sharp air, the flickering light throwing both her and the cop's shadow against the wall. "What do you want with my son?" she demanded, heart pounding.
His smile twisted into something sinister, an unsettling familiarity washing over her. "Just keeping him safe, Leela. You should be more concerned about the stories they whisper at the diner." The weight of his words crushed her. They resonated like a warning bell. As he lingered, the street around them seemed to darken further, shadows creeping closer, suffocating their light. "They say the missing boys return, Leela," he hissed, "in ways you wouldn't dare to imagine." A tremor shot through her as she realized the web of safety she built to protect Max was unraveling. Could it be true? Were the shadows harboring something dark, something unfathomable lurking in the very heart of Ridgewood? She felt a frigid finger of doubt trace down her spine. The walls of her quaint suburb suddenly felt fragile. She backed away, the coolness of the darkness pressing hard against her. In that moment, Leela knew the truth was far closer than she'd ever feared. A sinister veil lay over the town, and every vanished child left echoes she now feared would pull her family in. Silence stretched, then shattered with a whispered promise of chaos. "You can't hide from the truth, Leela. It's already here." Leela stumbled back, the weight of the cop's words wrapping around her like a cold hand. Panic surged within her, raw and urgent. She turned abruptly, every instinct screaming at her to escape, to run. The diner's door slammed behind her, echoing ominously like a gunshot through the darkened street. Max stood frozen near the flickering neon lights, eyes wide and pleading. "Mom, we have to go inside," he shouted, his voice hardly cutting through the sound of the rain. But Leela was already moving, pulling him close as they hustled toward the safety of the diner. She could feel the cop's gaze burning into her back, an invisible noose tightening around her throat. As Leela and Max stepped back into the diner, she could sense the atmosphere thickening, laden with whispers and shadows that crowded the edges. The patrons had shifted their attention toward them, fear casting deep shadows across their faces. The trucker gave Leela a knowing look, his lips tightening into a thin line, as if he'd seen the confrontation outside and understood the weight of their shared terror. "Is everything all right?" the elderly woman from booth 6 asked, her voice shaking, thick with concern. Leela swallowed hard, shaking her head as she ushered Max to sit. "I don't know, but I don't think we're safe out there." She stared out the window again, seeking, hoping for some sign that the cop had vanished. But the parking lot lay undisturbed, the figure still there, lurking, watching. Footsteps echoed down the diner's linoleum floor, slow and deliberate. The waitress approached cautiously, pausing to refill the coffee pot. "You two seem rattled," she said, her eyes glancing nervously toward the door. "The storm's making everyone uneasy. It brings out the worst in people." "Did you hear what that officer said?" Max interjected sharply. "He wasn't just watching us, he knew things about the boys." The waitress hesitated, her hand trembling slightly as she poured. "There are always stories, sweetie, but it's best not to talk of them. You never know who's listening." Her words trailed off, eyes darting toward the bleary reflection of the cop outside. "It's about St. Michael's," Leela muttered, more to herself. "They think the children return. What does that even mean?" Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the air, striking fear into the hearts of everyone in the diner. A window shattered as the wind whipped through, rain catching their shocked expressions. Leela's heart raced as she flinched, expecting to see what had broken through the glass. Instead, the cop was still there, but now something darker loomed by his side. A shadow clung to him, shifting, swirling. Whispers caught on the edge of silence. "He's not just watching," someone muttered. "He's calling for them." Leela's hand shook, adrenaline pulsing violently through her veins. "We need to go. We can't stay here," she blurted, grabbing Max's arm. "Mom, look," Max pointed, fear written across his young face. The cop took a step forward, and the shadow beside him lunged, as if aware of the fear in the diner, the fear echoing in their hearts. Leela knew then that whatever was happening was far more than mere whispers or threats. It was real, breathing, poised to strike. "Help me," a voice called from the shadows outside, thin and desperate. The sound sent chills racing through Leela. It was almost like it was beckoning her to follow. As dread swept through her, Leela realized with horror, the shadows had teeth, and they were hungry. Before she could understand what that meant, the door of the diner swung open with a creak that echoed like thunder, and the air shifted sickly as a cold wave rolled in. "What have we done?" whispered the waitress, panic coursing through her. Leela stood rooted to the spot, breath hitching. The shadows were closing in. The time for hiding was over. What had begun as a quiet night was spiraling into a nightmare. But Leela couldn't let her family be consumed by terrors they didn't understand. Could she confront the shadow taking form at the diner door? She felt a whisper in her ear, chilling her resolve. "You can't escape the truth."
And deep down, she knew everything was about to change. The door swung open wider, and Leela's breath hitched. The rain-slicked darkness outside seemed to swallow the diner whole, devouring the light. The cop stood unwavering, but the shadow next to him flared with a life of its own, weaving like smoke, thick and tangible. "Get away from the door!" someone screamed. A table of 4 huddled together, eyes darting and mouths half open in shock. The air grew colder, the smell of damp earth and decay seeping through the cracks. "Mom," Mac's voice called, trembling with fear.
"You can't escape the truth." And just as they ran, the shadows unleashed a wailing cry, pulling her back toward the diner, toward the ghosts that hungered for her in the dark. They were not done yet. What truth lay behind the cop's words? And how far would Lila have to go to confront the frightening shadows of the past? The alley swallowed them whole, darkness draping over Lila and Max like a wet blanket. She gasped, the dampness clinging to her skin, each breath heavy with the smell of mold and forgotten dreams. She glanced back toward the diner, where the shadows writhed like angry serpents, still grasping at the door that had just slammed shut behind them. An instinctive urge to fight the pull of the unseen terror gripped her, but fear twisted her stomach. "Mom, please," Max whimpered, his small hand trembling in hers. He looked up at her, eyes wide with panic. "What were those things? We need to get away, now." "Yes, I know," she snapped, the urgency sharpening her voice. She hesitated, but then stumbled forward, urging Max to keep pace. They raced deeper into the alley, flanked by towering brick walls that seemed to close in on them. Each step echoed off the surfaces, mocking their plight with a hollow reverberation that made her heart race faster. Then she halted. Just ahead was a flickering streetlight, too weak, too imperfect, but its glow felt like a weak promise of safety. "There," Lila pointed, heart pounding with tentative hope. "We can make it." They dashed toward the light, but shadows pooled in the cracks of the pavement, slithering closer as if drawn by their desperation. The alleys narrowed like a trap, whispering fears in her ears. They had to push through. "Keep running, Max," she shouted. Just as they reached the light, it sputtered and went out, plunging them into a blackness so complete it constricted her breath. Silently screaming, they stumbled, Lila's heart hammering against her ribs as dread filled the space around them. "No, no, no," she murmured, eyes flailing, trying to grasp the darkness, but it seemed alive, breathing, swirling. Fear constricted around her throat like a vice. How could they fight something that thrived in the dark? Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the alley, reverberating against the walls. Lila turned to run, but something slashed through the shadows behind them, a presence so menacing that it froze her in place. "Mom?" Max's voice cracked, echoing her fear. The shadows erupted, forming dark shapes that seemed to take on a life of their own, swirling up at the walls like a living tapestry. Lila felt the whispers return, sharper this time. "You can't escape." She reached for Max, but his grip faltered, and suddenly he was pulled back, his body jerked away from her like a puppet on strings. "Lila!" he screamed, panic resonating as he struggled against unseen hands that pulled him toward the darkness. "No, Max!"
Leela fought to reach him, desperation flooding her veins as she lunged forward. The shadows danced around her, cold and chaotic, pricking at her skin. She could barely see through the blackness, but she had to save him. Her mind screamed for her to act. "Let him go!" she shouted, voice trembling. A flicker of movement among the shadows caught her attention. Something glinting. Was that a face? But the anguish in Max's eyes snapped her back. There was no time. With a surge of adrenaline, Leela drew on the very essence of her fear. She charged at the swirling mass, arms outstretched, ready to confront the darkness. But as she plunged into the shadows, something cold wrapped around her, pulling her deeper. The world dimmed, and with one last glance, she caught a glimpse of Max's terrified expression. "Mom!" he yelled, one last time as the shadows tightened their grip. Then there was nothing but silence. Leela's mind raced, her thoughts spiraling. What had she done? Could she really confront the darkness, or had she just dragged them both into its depths? What awaited them in this suffocating void? Would she even be able to pull Max back, or was this just the beginning of their nightmare? Leela couldn't tell which way was up or down. She floated in a void that drowned out even her thoughts. Panic surged through her veins like fire, her heartbeat echoing loudly in her ears. It was pure darkness, so thick it felt tangible, wrapping around her like barbed wire. Max, she had to find him. Just the thought of her son sent a jolt of adrenaline through her, and she pushed forward, fists clenched, reaching out into the blackness. "Max!" she called. The sound of her own voice shocked her, sharp and hollow, swallowed by the void. Silence loomed in response, heavy and oppressive. The darkness thickened, reflecting her unyielding dread. Suddenly, a whimper penetrated the stillness. Leela whipped around, heart racing. "Max!" she shouted, straining to listen for a second sound, the comforting echo of her son's familiar voice. "Mom!" His cry was faint, like a candle flickering in a storm. It came from deeper within the suffocating blackness. Leela's heart flipped. She sprinted toward the sound, the dread clawing at her like icy fingers. Each step she took seemed to drain her, breaking through layers of nothingness. The darkness felt alive, reacting to her movements, tightening as if it were intentionally trapping her. "I'm coming, Max," she forced the words out. Desperation clawed at her throat. Suddenly, the ground shifted beneath her. She stumbled, feeling the floor bend and sway like a ship in a tempest. What kind of twisted reality had they stepped into? The dark didn't just surround her, it was changing, contorting around her thoughts. "Mom, please!" Max's voice was louder now, tinged with terror. She focused on it, following the sound like a lifeline in a storm. "I can't see you." "Stay where you are," Leela urged, fighting to steady her voice.
She hated how small it sounded in the face of this overwhelming terror. And then, light. A flicker, just a flash, like a memory breaking through the fog. Leela turned. A faint shimmer glinted in the shadows ahead, its vague outline taking shape. A door? She squinted, desperation fueling her pace. "Max!" she shouted again, racing toward the light. Each step drew her closer, but the shadows began to swirl more violently, enveloping her in their darkness again. "Mom!" he cried out, panic rising with every word. The urgency in his voice urged her forward, pushed her through the thickening air saturated with despair. The light flickered again, this time brighter, almost welcoming. "Max, I'm coming!" she screamed as she stumbled closer. But just as she reached the doorway, it flickered once more and dimmed. The flickering light extinguished, plunging her back into the void. It was as if the hope had fled, leaving behind only despair. The darkness closed in again, swallowing her with a renewed ferocity. "Mom?" Max's voice echoed, now even more distant. "No, I won't lose you!" Leela's heart thundered. With all her strength, she lunged toward where she felt the glow had been. Then, suddenly, the ground beneath her vanished, and she plummeted, spiraling into the dark. The sensation of falling wrapped around her like a cold embrace, a chilling reminder of their isolation. The darkness roared, a cacophony of despair and rage exploding around her. No more hope, no more sound.
Max vanished in the deafening silence. And then it stopped. She hit something hard. Pain flared through her body, but she forced herself to sit up. Slowly, she glanced around. Was she alone? The void felt different now, the air static, alive with a pulsing energy she couldn't comprehend. "Max?" she whispered into the quiet, fear trembling in her voice. Something shifted behind her. Leela's breath caught, dread washing over her. She spun around, each nerve ending screaming. What waited for her in this ominous stillness? Would she find her son again, or had she stepped into a nightmare beyond escape? The silence twisted into a heavy presence, closing in around Leela as she turned. It felt like the void was inhaling deeply, preparing to unleash something terrible. She steadied her breath, the dread melding with a deep-rooted fear of the unknown. The whisper of movement was unmistakable. It sounded like shuffling, the kind you'd hear right after the lights flickered out. "Max," she called again, her voice sharper than before, slicing through the suffocating stillness. No answer came, but the shuffling grew nearer, accompanied by a low, unearthly hum that vibrated through the air. Leela clenched her fists, summoning every ounce of courage. She took a hesitant step backward, hoping to find a way out, but the ground felt unsteady, like a tightrope strung between two terrifying realities. "I have to find him," she murmured. The thought of her son pushed her into the depths of her own fear. Suddenly, the hum morphed into laughter. It was hollow, cruel, and echoed darkly, sending icy tendrils coursing down her spine. "Max?" she repeated, voice trembling as she scanned her surroundings. The laughter sounded wrong, twisted, laced with malice. Her stomach churned. She took another step back, each movement weighted by the chilling sensation of being watched. Ahead, a flicker of light dared to appear again, illuminating a small section of the void. Shadows danced in the glow, contorting to form shapes that sent her heart racing. She had no choice. She had to move toward that light, toward whatever it was. As she stepped forward, the shadows seemed to take form, grotesque figures weaving in and out of the edge of her vision. "Help!" a voice cried out, breaking through the laughter. Not Max, but filled with an unannounced urgency that pricked her senses. "Help me, please!" The darkness shifted, creating a barrier, vibrating with malevolence at her approach. Leela paused. Who was that? Another victim, lost like her? She beckoned. "I'm coming!" But the voice was swallowed up, submerged in the thickening shadows. A chill ran down her spine, the air now feeling electric. She had a choice, turn back or venture into the unknown. But if Max was still lost in this nightmare, she couldn't let fear dictate her next move. Taking a deep breath, she pressed on toward the light. As she neared, the bizarre figures solidified into grotesque versions of familiar faces, friends, family, all trapped in expressions of agony. Their mouths twisted into screams, but no sound came out. Confusion choked her as she stumbled backward, disoriented. "No, this can't be real!" But the light intensified, blinding her momentarily before revealing something much darker. A dark, looming silhouette took shape right before her, pulsing with the energy of her fears. It felt like an entity seeking to consume her very essence. Leela's breath hitched, fear coiling tight in her chest. "Mom!" Max's voice shattered the illusion, echoing against the walls of darkness like thunder. It sent a wave of hope through her. "Where are you?" "Max!" Leela screamed, desperation clawing at her. The figure lurched, the shadow swirling with greater fury, trying to snatch her back. "You must decide," it hissed, a voice dripping with malice. "Will you save him or linger in this despair?"
She faltered, panic surging anew, her love for Max battling with the terror suffocating her resolve. "Choose!" the voice bellowed, the shadows slithering closer, whispering her doubts. Leela stood there, heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. The choice lay before her, wrapped in darkness. Was there truly a way out? Would she lose everything trying to save him? In that moment of hesitation, the light flared once more, illuminating something behind her, a door, ajar, but with shadows creeping around it. What lay beyond?
Would it lead her to Max or another darkness more suffocating than before? Just as doubt gripped her, the door swung open, revealing a terrible truth, one that could change everything. What choice would she make next? The door creaked open slowly, revealing a darkened corridor beyond, lined with faded wallpaper peeling at the corners. Lila felt her heart race. Each beat echoed in the chilling silence like a war drum. This hallway felt like a vein running deep into an abyss, tempting her to plunge into darkness. "Max!" she shouted, her voice fracturing into the void. She stepped inside, the cold air wrapping around her like ice water. She could feel the shadows prodding at her, feeding off her fear, but her need to find her son propelled her forward. Each step she took amplified the silence, causing her to glance back over her shoulder, expecting something to leap from the dark. The corridor felt alive, shifting, stretching out. The low hum from before surged again, growing louder, morphing into a chaos of whispers. They sounded almost familiar, like voices she should recognize, but couldn't quite place. It gnawed at her sanity. "Help! Mom!" Max's voice pierced through the cacophony, a fragile thread of hope amid the gathering storm. Lila pressed forward, breath shallow and frantic. The whispers crescendoed, turning to a panicked shouting, drowning out everything else. Suddenly she stumbled across something, her foot catching on an unseen object. She fell hard, skin scraping against the cold wooden floor. The pain jolted her into clarity, a light piercing through her fog of fear. Gritting her teeth, she pushed herself up, brushing off the dust and whatever filth was now staining her hands. Ahead, flickering lights illuminated another door, this one more ornate, with carvings that seemed to writhe as if alive. Each detail twisted her stomach, anxiety tightening like a noose. But Max was in there. She could feel it. "Max!" she called again, letting her voice echo, shattering the hollow silence. The response was immediate. A soft thud reached her ears from behind the door, then silence, marked by a heavy, pregnant pause. "Mom, please!" The desperation in her son's voice ignited a fire in her heart. Lila rushed to the door, trembling fingers clutching the handle. It was icy, as if forged in the winter's grip. What waited beyond it? Was it salvation or another slice of despair? Taking a breath, she flung the door open. The scene unfolded like a gruesome tableau, Max standing in the center, framed by swirling shadows. But something was off. His eyes were hollow, glazed over, reflecting a darkness deeper than the room itself. "Max, are you okay?" she gasped, trying to reach him, but the shadows seemed to pull at her, anchoring her feet in place. The shadows morphed and draped over him, whispering secrets, wrapping their tendrils around his limbs. "No!" "It's too late, Mom," he murmured, his voice a haunting echo. "Mom, please!" The desperation in her son's voice ignited a fire in her heart. Lila rushed to the door, trembling fingers clutching the handle. It was icy, as if forged in the winter's grip. What waited beyond it? Was it salvation or another slice of despair? Taking a breath, she flung the door open. The scene unfolded like a gruesome tableau, Max standing in the center, framed by swirling shadows. But something was off. His eyes were hollow, glazed over, reflecting a darkness deeper than the room itself. "Max, are you okay?" she gasped, trying to reach him, but the shadows seemed to pull at her, anchoring her feet in place. The shadows morphed and draped over him, whispering secrets, wrapping their tendrils around his limbs. "No!" "It's too late, Mom," he murmured, his voice a haunting echo.
You shouldn't have come here. Panic surged like ice running through her veins. What do you mean? We can get out of here together. But the specters pulsed, tighter and tighter, as if they were feeding off his hopelessness. Lila felt the cold grip of despair clutch at her heart. The very air felt thick, stifling her breath. Memories rushed through her, her baby's laughter, bedtime stories, the warmth of shared moments. All of it threatened to drown her in sadness. "Join us." A chorus of voices drifted through the air, grating against her sanity. They were her mother, her friends, all calling, urging her to surrender to the shadows. But she couldn't, not while there was still hope. "Max!" she screamed, tearing through the shadows in a desperate lunge. The darker tendrils recoiled like angry serpents, hissing words she couldn't understand. She reached for her son, their hands almost touching, the barrier between them cracking under their will. Then the whisper sharpened into shrieks, piercing her through layers of darkness, drawing blood from her soul. "Choose!" the entity roared, a voice so powerful it reverberated through her very being. "Mom, please!" Max cried again, reaching out. In that moment of terrifying clarity, Lila had to decide. Would she try to save him, knowing it might seal her fate? Or would she escape this horror, letting the shadows claim her son forever? The choice loomed, agonizing, the darkness all around vibrating with anticipation. With one final look into his frightened eyes, Lila steeled herself. "I won't abandon you." Suddenly, a crackling light surged through the air. She lunged forward into the shadows, breaking the newly formed barrier, praying it wouldn't be her last mistake. But as she crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut. A deafening silence enveloped the corridor once more. Was it too late? Could she really defy the shadows and save her son? What truth awaited her in the depths of despair? The darkness closed in around Lila. She felt heavy, each breath a struggle against the suffocating weight of despair. Where was Max? Had she truly made a mistake by plunging into this abyss? The dim light flickered ominously, casting monstrous shadows that danced on the walls, taunting her. "Max!" she cried, her voice a raspy whisper that echoed back, twisted and distorted, as if the house itself were mocking her. Panic clawed at her throat, and she pressed her palms against the door, the wood cool and solid beneath her trembling fingers. There had to be a way, there had to be something she could do. Lila spun around, desperate for another way out. The corridor stretched unnaturally, elongating like a serpent. Walls seemed to undulate, shifting subtly with a life of their own. The whispers returned, rising and falling like a cruel tide. They slithered into her ears and burrowed into her mind, planting seeds of doubt. "Turn back," a voice hissed. "It's too late for him." "Shut up!" she yelled into the dark, fury igniting a small spark of hope. She had come too far to retreat. She had to find him. Lila stumbled forward, the flickering light guiding her like a reluctant lantern. As she moved deeper, the whispers morphed into a chant, rhythmic and hypnotic. Memories of Max invaded her mind, his laughter, the way he'd wrap his arms around her, the warmth of his tiny body against hers. She felt a surge of determination mixed with terror. That warmth was her tether to reality. It had to be. "Max, I'm coming!" she shouted, the sound resonating in an emptiness that seemed to swallow it whole. A door loomed ahead,
more ancient and ominous than the last. It was not just a door, but a portal, sprung from the very heart of darkness. All at once, the shadows thickened around her legs, like fingernails scratching at her skin. She stumbled, tearing herself free with a surge of adrenaline. "Mom!" The cry was faint but real, ringing clear through the oppressive veil. It ignited Leela's heart, flooding her veins with renewed courage. "Just a bit further," she urged herself, grasping the cold handle of the door. With a heave, she yanked it open and rushed inside. The room was a stark contrast. A blinding white light flooded her senses, almost tranquil, yet it vibrated with malevolence. At the center, Max stood, his expression frozen in terror, surrounded by an array of floating toys and images from his past. Flashes of birthdays, family outings, and laughter that felt like knives cutting through her heart. "Mom!" he called again, but the shadows were back, swirling around him like a tempest, distorting his form. "Max, hold on!" She charged forward, panic sharpening her focus. Suddenly, a barrier materialized, a thick fog of darkness, shimmering with malice. Leela was repelled backward, slammed against the doorframe, a surge of pain exploding in her shoulder. She gasped, her heart racing. "No!" she screamed, eyes wide, desperately clawing at the suffocating barrier. "I won't let you take him." The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, the shadows twisting in a frenzy around Max, drowning him in darkness. Each second felt like an eternity. "Join us, Leela." A ghostly voice beckoned, smooth as silk, yet tainted with the bitterness of the void. "End this suffering. Let it go." Leela couldn't focus. Every ounce of her mind screamed against giving in. "Not now, not ever," she declared, her voice trembling but resolute. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from her heart, pushing against the darkness, expanding like a shock wave. The shadow shrieked, recoiling as hope surged through Leela, igniting the path before her. "Max, grab my hand," she shouted, extending her arm toward her son. Hope ignited one last time, the darkness wavering for an instant, teetering on the edge. But would it hold? Was this light strong enough to dispel the shadows, or would it bite back, consuming both mother and son? The moment hung suspended. And then, just like that, the light flickered. Would they emerge together or be lost in the dark forever? The light jerked violently, flickering like a dying star, and Leela's outstretched hand shook with uncertainty. Time twisted around them, pulling and stretching like the shadows. If she lost this moment, what would happen to Max? With every ounce of her will, she surged forward, the blinding light heating her skin, driving back the cold tendrils wrapping around them. "Mom!" Max's voice struggled to break through the chaos, desperation lacing his words. But darkness warped it, making it sound more like a plea than a call. "Hold on!" she screamed, willing the light to stay strong. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat of fear driving her onward. She could almost feel the distance between them collapse. Without warning, the shadows roared back, a tidal wave of darkness that surged forward. The barrier around Max writhed, thickening like an oily storm. It reached for Leela, wrapping around her ankles, pulling her back. The air grew heavy, filled with a chill that bit into her skin and settled in her bones. "No!" she shouted, panic clawing at her voice. "I won't let you take him!" With a fierce cry, Leela forced the light to burn brighter. It surged from her heart, pushing against the encroaching darkness. But the shadows fought hard, snapping like angry dogs, hungry for her surrender. Just as the light seemed to gain traction, a figure emerged from the edge of the darkness. Tall and skeletal, it towered over Max, a twisted caricature of everything Leela feared.
Its eyes glowed, hollow and malevolent, locked onto her with an intensity that chilled her blood. "Your son is ours," it hissed, every syllable dripping with malice. "Join him in the void. Eternal peace awaits." The creature stretched a hand toward Max, whose face blurred, caught between terror and trust. "Don't listen to it," Leela shouted, her voice cracking. "I'm here, Max. I won't leave you." She dove forward, forcing the pain and fear aside, fighting against the crushing weight of despair that threatened to drag her down. Suddenly, the shadows lunged, a living thing now, full of anger. Leela stumbled, the barrier around her tightening like a noose. The cold seeped into her bones, urging her to relent. But within the depths of her agony, a flicker of defiance arose, lighting her spirit anew. "In the name of love," she whispered fiercely, "I command you." Instantly, the light burst forth, illuminating the room with a searing radiance. For a brief heartbeat, the darkness recoiled, shrieking as if struck. The shadows writhed and cracked, revealing glimpses of Max, who clutched at the void around him, fighting against the oppressive force. "Mom!" he cried again, the agony in his voice tearing through Leela's heart. She felt the barrier weakening just enough for hope to seep in. "Grab my hand!" She took a step, feeling the shadows scratch at her skin, a burning sensation that threatened to pull her apart. But she wouldn't let go. As their fingers finally touched, a surge of warmth coursed through them, radiant and powerful. The oppressive whispering escalated to a frenzied scream, the remnants of darkness swirling chaotically around them. "Together!" Leela shouted, and they pulled at the same time, tugging against the all-consuming darkness. In a blinding flash, the world shifted. For an instant, there was silence. Then a sudden crash as reality splintered, darkness ripping apart, exposing raw, blinding light. It was a roar of purity, an eruption that left no place for shadows or despair. But just as quickly, the light dimmed, and Leela felt a shift beneath her feet. The ground trembled, and the walls of the room began to close in. In that fleeting moment of brilliance, she caught sight of something. Thick, black tendrils bursting forth in desperate writhing, reassembling themselves. "Max!" she screamed as the brightness faltered. The certainty of safety turned to dread, and the light flickered once more. What new horrors awaited them as the darkness bled back into reality? Would they ever escape its grasp? The darkness seemed to swirl, a living entity rebelling against the light that had momentarily driven it away. But Leela's heart burned with a fierce determination. "Not again," she whispered fiercely to herself. She felt Max's hand gripping hers tightly, and through their shared fear, she found strength. "Mom!" Max's voice quivered, a mixture of terror and hope. She glanced at him, and in that brief exchange, she understood everything. They were in this together, two hearts against an endless void. The shadows could try to claw them apart, but not while they held on to each other. "On three," she said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "1, 2, 3. They lunged toward the flickering light, willing their shared hope to break free from the stranglehold of despair. For a moment, it felt like they were suspended in time, caught between light and shadow, fear and courage. But the flicker of the light surged, igniting a white-hot blaze that pushed back against the darkness with a furious roar. The shadows writhed, shrieking in anger and twisting around them as if trying to snuff out the light once and for all. Leela could feel the intense pressure of the darkness attempting to envelop them again, clawing at her skin and whispering vile promises into her ears. But she gritted her teeth, the love for her son creating a barrier against the dread. "Keep holding my hand, Max. We can do this," she shouted. Their hearts synchronized, pounding like war drums. As they surged forward, the boundary between the two worlds shattered, sending shards of darkness flying like broken glass. Leela and Max raced toward the door now wide open, its frame glowing with a golden hue that beckoned them with the promise of safety. And then the shadows lunged, long black tendrils sweeping in like a storm, furious and relentless. Lila felt them brush against her skin, cold and whispering, the sounds forming words of despair. "Join us, forever." But she shook her head, fueled by nothing but the instinct to protect her son. Suddenly, from the center of the swirling chaos, a guttural voice erupted, booming and commanding. "You cannot escape what is yours." The shadows recoiled as if being struck by lightning, but Lila felt their grip loosening. She pushed through, focusing on the warmth of the light that promised to lead them home. "Mom!" Max screamed again, the fierce urgency in his voice pulling at her heart. She glanced back, her breath hitching at the sight of him surrounded by the gathering shadows, the very fabric of their nightmare. "Mom, don't leave me!" "Never!" Lila shouted back, slicing through the heavy silence that threatened to consume them. She could feel the warmth radiate between them, a tether stronger than any shadow. Their feet moved in unison, navigating the hurdles of despair with a fierce resolve. With every shred of willpower, they rushed through the threshold. The light swirled around them, enveloping them in a cocoon of warmth, and as they crossed, it erupted in a blinding flash of brilliance. The shadows shrieked one last time, a cacophony that echoed through the dark corridor, before dissolving into a stream of nothingness. Lila staggered, pulling Max close. The world around them shifted, colors brightened, and the oppressive weight began to lift. They were outside, their backs pressed against the cool metal of the diner's door. Rain fell softly, washing away the remnants of terror. The storm seemed to recede, and the night, once heavy with dread, blossomed anew. Max clutched her tightly, the warmth of his small body anchoring her in this surreal moment. She looked into his fearful yet relieved eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, a smile broke through her anguish. "It's over," she breathed, wrapping her arms around him, inhaling his familiar scent. But deep down, she could still feel the shadows, lurking just beyond the edges of her vision. "You okay?" "Yeah, I think so." He looked around, scanning the quiet street, the calmness almost eerie in contrast to what had just happened. What was that place? That was the darkness. But we beat it together. Lila squeezed him tighter. They had faced their fears, they had clawed their way to freedom. But she knew that scars would linger, memories tainted with shadows. And though they stood there, bathed in the flickering light of the diner's sign, both mother and son understood. True safety was more than just physical. It lay in their bond, forged with the fire of love and resilience, the one thing that could withstand even the darkest of nights. "Come on," Lila said, her voice renewed with purpose. "Let's go back inside. We need to talk to everyone."
As the door swung open, revealing the warmth of the diner, the haunting shadows of the night seemed to fade behind them, an echo of what once was. But Lila knew. She knew that darkness could slumber, but it could never truly be vanquished. And as long as they held on to each other, they would remain brave warriors against whatever terrors lay ahead. The diner welcomed them back, a sanctuary of warmth, light, and familiar faces. Lila felt the thrill of community around them, cementing the love that pulled away the shadows. She wasn't just fighting for her son anymore. She was fighting for all of them. The road ahead remained uncertain, but as Lila exchanged glances with Max, they both knew it was one they would walk together. "Hey, can you do me a favor?" Max asked, breaking the heavy silence. "Anything, kiddo. Promise me, if the shadows ever come back, we'll fight them again." Always, she promised, her heart swelling with assurance. They would embrace the light, leaning on one another whenever the stormy nights threatened their peace. And as the diner buzzed back to life, shadows danced at the edges, but they felt no fear. They had found their strength in each other, and the truth rang clear. Together, they could face anything. You need to subscribe now for more heart-pounding stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. This is the moment to show your support by smashing that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support means everything. Don't hold back. Flood the comment section with your thoughts and theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's spread the word.